The wind scours my face with brine and the sour tang of decay, each gust like a dry, grating whisper against my skin. Dust bowl grit, thick as ash, coats my tongue as I push through the derelict neighborhood blocks toward the observatory. Its skeletal frame looms against the bruised storm cloud sky, windows' shattered eyes staring blankly. My boots crunch on broken concrete, the sound swallowed by the wind's mournful hiss. At another dead end, I think, fury a tight knot in my chest. A tip about a buried truth in this godforsaken place. The forensic pathologist in me, jaded and weary, dismisses it as a prank, a waste of time. But the case file, the missing child's photo smudged with dirt, pulls me forward. I dig through the rubble pile beside the observatory's collapsed foundation. My fingers, coated in gritty dust, scrape against cold, damp stone. The smell of damp earth and something older, like forgotten bones, fills my nostrils. I kick aside a rusted metal beam, the scritch of it sliding against concrete, echoing unnervingly in the hollow building. Safety, just the wind playing tricks. I tell myself, though the sound feels too deliberate, too close. I find the locket buried beneath a shard of stained glass, tarnished silver cold even through my gloves. I pry it open with a thumbnail, the hinge stiff with age. Inside, a tiny faded portrait stares back, a figure with limbs stretched impossibly long, fingers like twigs, eyes too large, too dark, swallowing the face whole. The eyes seem to follow me in the dim light filtering through the broken dome. I brush dust from the glass, my breath shallow. The wind suddenly drops, leaving a suffocating silence broken only by the sudden scritch of metal on concrete. It's coming from the west wall, where the telescope's base should be. I turn, scanning the debris. Nothing moves. Then, the scraping intensifies, sharpening into a rasping, siphoned scrape, scrape like a knife edge dragged over stone. It's too precise, too close to the ground. My skin prickles, the familiar sensation of icy fingers tracing patterns on my neck, a cold dread that has nothing to do with the wind, impossible, just the wind on the metal front. But the sound shifts. It's no longer from the wall, it's coming from the locket itself. I hold it tighter, the cold metal biting into my palm. The scraping stops. A breath then, a new sound, a wet grinding scrape from side, the locket's tiny hinges, not metal on concrete. Metal inside, the metal. The sound vibrates up my arm, a cold, wet rasp against my bone. The tiny kitten perched on the edge of a shattered telescope lens doesn't move. It just watches me, those enormous, unblinking eyes reflecting the bruised sky. Its fur is impossibly soft, perpetually juvenile, a silent witness to the locket's new internal hunger. The scraping deepens, a rhythmic scrape inside the cold metal, like something trapped, desperate, scratching to get out went. My fingers tremble, the locket suddenly heavy, alive. The wind picks up again, carrying the scent of brine and decay, but the sound from the locket is louder now, a wet, grinding scrape that seems to echo inside my own skull, the only sound in the world as the storm cloud sky bleeds into the darkness. The scraping within the locket intensified, a wet, grinding insistence that vibrated through my bones. The kitten, a smudge of perpetual youth against the debris, remained motionless, its eyes reflecting the bruised sky like twin pools of stagnant water. I fought the urge to drop the locket, to fling it into the dust and be done with it. Fury, that familiar knot in my chest, tightened. Just the wind, just old metal. But the sound was too deliberate, too insistent. My gaze drifted to the shattered remains of the observatory's windows. A single pane, fractured but intact, offered a sliver of the storm-racked sky. The light filtering through it illuminated something glinting amongst the rubble. I knelt, ignoring the grit that wormed its way into my joints, and brushed away a layer of dust. A pair of spectacles. Wire, rimmed, tarnished, like relics from a forgotten age. Hesitantly, I picked them up. They felt strangely warm in my gloved hand, a stark contrast to the locket's frigid weight. "40, probably just some kid's lost toys," I muttered, but the compulsion to put them on was undeniable. I slid them onto my face. The world shifted, not immediately. It was a subtle alteration, a recalibration of perception. Then I saw it. A swirling aura, a dark, oppressive storm cloud, coalescing in the space between the telescope's base and the collapsed wall. It pulsed with a low, resonant hum, like a distant organ drone. Within the cloud, a figure began to materialize, tall and gaunt, draped in what appeared to be decaying library cardigans. A spectral librarian, my breath hitched. The fury drained away, replaced by a cold, paralyzing dread. The scent of brine and decay intensified, thick and cloying in my nostrils. The scraping from the locket seemed to fade, momentarily eclipsed by the unsettling hum of the librarian's aura. I felt a tremor run through me, a visceral recoil from something fundamentally wrong. The librarian didn't speak, didn't move. Really, beyond a slow, deliberate gesture, a pointing finger directed toward the kitten. Its enormous, unblinking eyes reflected the spectral figure, two miniature storm clouds mirroring the larger one hovering nearby. The kitten, oblivious, continued its silent vigil. A low froid-made emanated from the spectacles, a subtle distortion of the air. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the librarian vanished. The dark storm cloud aura dissipated, leaving behind only the oppressive scent of decay and the persistent 20 scrape from the locket, now louder than ever. I blinked, disoriented, the world snapping back into focus. The spectacles felt heavier on my face, the wire rims pressing into my skin. A chill snaked around my wrist, the icy fingers of the anomaly tracing patterns on my skin. I instinctively drew back my hand, examining it. The wind picked up, a mournful howl that seemed to echo the librarian's silent gesture. The kitten didn't react, its gaze unwavering. I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched, analyzed. I looked down at the spectacles, a sudden terrifying realization dawning. The world hadn't shifted back. The Thofi aura remained. I raised my hand slowly, deliberately, and brought it into my line of sight. The lenses reflected back not the familiar image of a forensic pathologist, weary and jaded, but a swirling vortex of darkness, a storm cloud. My own aura. The spectacles displayed my own emotional state as a reflection of the spectral librarian's. The scraping from the locket intensified, a frantic, desperate rhythm. The observatory's door groaned shut behind me, a slow exhalation of rusted hinges, and for the first time in what felt like years I breathed in the wind without the stench of brine and decay clinging to it. The sidewalk beneath my boots was a lattice of cracked concrete, veins of black tar oozing up between the fractures like slow, viscous blood. Each step sent a dull thud through my soles, the sound of molasses pouring into a jar thick, relentless, impossible to outrun. The dust bowl haze thinned as I walked, the air sharpening into something almost clean, but the relief was a lie. My fingers twitched at my sides, the memory of the spectacles' weight still burned into my skin. I turned left toward the office, my usual route. The streetlights flickered in unison, their sickly yellow glow pulsing like a dying heart. The sound of my boots on the pavement was swallowed by the molasses drag of the wind, the air thick with the scent of oil and old paper, the kind of smell that lingers in abandoned libraries. My pulse hammered in my throat, but I forced myself to walk slower, to savor the illusion of freedom. For just a block. Just one block. The kitten appeared on my shoulder without warning, its tiny weight pressing into the collar of my coat. It didn't blink, didn't move, just watched the streetlights with those unnervingly still eyes reflecting the flickering glow like twin moons. I exhaled, the breath fogging in the cold air. "You're supposed to be in the observatory," I muttered, but the words tasted hollow. The kitten didn't respond, of course. It never did. It just sat there, a silent witness to whatever madness I was sinking into. The wind carried the metallic tang of the scraping sound now, not from the locket but from somewhere else. Closer, sharper, my stomach twisted. I stopped walking, my boots sinking slightly into the softening pavement. The molasses drag of the air thickened, pressing in around me like a second skin. Then, a streetlight above me sputtered, its glass bulb cracking with a sound like a whip cracking. The flicker died, and the darkness that followed wasn't natural. It was a fire presence, a thing that coiled around my ankles, cold and deliberate. The molasses pour stopped. The world held its breath. And then, a single, sharp scrape. It came from the alley to my right, the sound of metal dragging across concrete. But wrong, too precise. My breath hitched. The kitten's fur stood on end, the tiny muscles beneath its skin trembling. The alley mouth yawned open, black and hungry, and I knew I was never leaving. The door swung shut behind me, the lock clicking like a coffin lid, and I stood there for a moment, fingers pressed into the oak surface as if I could will the wood to absorb the stench clinging to my coat. Brine and something older, something fine-rotting. It was in my hair, under my nails, seeping into my pores. The office smelled different now, sterile and antiseptic, but the decay had followed me inside, a second skin of damp and rust. I peeled off the coat slowly, letting it drop to the floor in a heap. The fabric whispered against the tile, the sound like pages turning in a book no one has read in decades. My fingers trembled as I reached for the locket, the metal cold against my palm. The portrait inside was still there, the elongated limbs, the eyes too wide, too knowing. I exhaled, sharp and uneven, and the breath fogged the glass. For a second, the reflection in the locket wasn't mine. It was Subin Herzendaip, the woman from the portrait, her mouth moving soundlessly, her fingers tracing patterns on the air. The drawers began to vibrate before I even heard it. A low metallic furum filled the room, the sound of 1,000 needles scratching at glass. My pen hovered over the notepad, the inkwell trembling in its holder. I wrote the details. Swan gold locket, elongated limbs, eyes like black pools. But the words blurred, smearing into nothingness as if written in rain. The paper hissed beneath the pen, the fibers swelling with moisture, the letters dissolving into gray streaks. The kitten was on the bookshelf now, its tiny body coiled like a spring, its eyes reflecting the storm outside. Pale gray, endless of hungry. It didn't blink. It never did. The scraping sound started then, not from outside, not from the alley, but inside my skull. A metallic rasp like nails dragged across a chalkboard, only sharper, more twin deliberate. My hands flew to my temples, but the sound didn't stop. It moved, slithering down my spine, pooling in the hollow of my throat. Icy fingers traced my neck, light as a breath, cold as a grave. The sensation coiled around my windpipe, squeezing just enough to make my vision swim. I gasped, but no air came. The fingers moved lower, sketching patterns on my collarbone, the marks glowing faintly beneath the skin, like embers under ash. The scraping sound followed, mimicking the touch, a rhythm of metal against flesh. The inkwell tipped over. The ink spread across the notepad, black and viscous. But the words didn't form. Instead, the liquid writhed, twisting into shapes, limbs, eyes, a mouth before dissolving back into darkness. The bookshelf creaked. The kitten's tail twitched once, twice, then stilled. The scraping sound cut off mid-scrape, leaving only a high-pitched whine, like a needle stuck in a record, spinning faster and faster until it screamed. The shelves stretched endlessly, their spines whispering in the dark. I stood at the edge of the library, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and something fresh, like the first breath after drowning. The spectral librarian waited at the far end, her silhouette framed by the storm outside, the glass of the observatory door fogging with her breath. She held the locket in one hand, the metal catching the dim light like a wound. The portrait inside twitched end. The woman's fingers moved, her elongated limbs stretching across the tiny glass, her eyes widening until they bled into the frame. Fodini Vive Kensington, she murmured, and the sound wasn't in my ears. It was in my bones, vibrating through the marrow. The shelves groaned as they shifted, the books rearranging themselves into a spiral, pulling me forward. My fingers twitched. I wanted to run, but my feet were lead. The librarian's lips parted, and I saw the rows of teeth behind them, too many, too sharp. "You don't belong here," she said, and the words dissolved into static, leaving only the scraping sound metal against concrete. But closer now, finsid du in my skull. Insect with my pulse. Each beat a rasp of nails on bone. I woke with a gasp, the taste of rust in my mouth. The kitten was there, curled against my cheek, its fur damp as if it had been dragged through the rain. I recoiled, but it didn't move. Its eyes pale gray, endless locked onto mine. The storm cloud aura pulsed behind my lids, a bruise of violet and black, pressing against my skin. I exhaled, sharp and uneven, and the breath fogged the air between us. The kitten's tail twitched once, then stilled. The scraping sound returned, but this time it wasn't in my head. It was the thud of fists, the walls, the fody floor. The metal frame of the observatory door trembled, the hinges groaning like a dying man. I pressed my palms to my temples. The librarian knew my name. The scraping synced with my heartbeat now, a rhythm of pain, scrape. Thud, thud, scrape, thud, thud. My vision swam. The kitten's fur bristled, its tiny body tensing. The aura behind my eyes flared, a storm breaking. The locket lay on the desk, the portrait inside twin breathing. The woman's mouth moved soundlessly, her elongated fingers tracing patterns in the air. I reached for it, but the librarian's voice slithered into my mind. "You were never here." The scraping stopped. The silence was worse. Then, the breathing. Slow, wet, too human. It came from the corner of the room, where the bookshelf met the wall. The kitten's ears flattened. The aura behind my eyes pulsed, a heartbeat of violet. The breathing deepened, a guttural rasp, like something dragging itself across the floor. The scraping returned, but softer now, a whisper against the dark. The librarian's voice echoed in the silence. "You'll learn. The pages are there, but they're wrong." My own handwriting, jagged and precise, now smeared like blood across the margins. and torn. Not ripped clean, no, the edges frayed, the ink bleeding into the gaps where words should be. The dates don't add up. I trace a finger along the margin where the first entry should be, where I know. I wrote about the storm, the way the glass of the observatory door wept in the cold. But it's gone. Just a smear of blue, like bruised sky pressed into paper. The spectacles sit on the desk, their lenses dull as a corpse's eyes. I should wear them. I need the auras. They're the only thing that ever made sense, but my fingers won't move. The memory of those lenses pressing into my skin, the weight of the frames against my temples, the way the world twin-shifted when I looked through them. It's all there, but distorted, like a reflection in broken glass. I remember the storm cloud aura, the violet bruise behind my eyes. But not how it when felt twined. Not the way it pulsed, like a second heartbeat, pressing against my skull. The wind howls outside, carrying the scent of brine and something older, something finchard rotting. It slithers through the cracks in the observatory walls, damp and thick like molasses dragged across the floor. I exhale, sharp and uneven, and the breath fogs the air between my fingers. The kitten is there again, its tiny body curled against the doorframe, its pale gray eyes fixed on me. It doesn't move, doesn't breathe, just watches. I press my palm to my neck, no icy fingers this time. No cold, no pain, just the memory of it, sharp as a blade. The sensation lingers, the phantom drag of something tracing patterns into my skin, not fingers, not nails. Teeth, maybe, but softer, wetter, like a mouth pressed against my throat. I recoil, but the kitten doesn't flinch. Its tail twitches once, a slow, deliberate motion like it's counting something. The map is worse. The observatory's layout is there, the doors, the windows, the shelves of books that shouldn't exist. None of it makes sense. There's a blank space where the corner should be, where the kitten few will see, where it if you watched. The pencil lines are smudged, the ink bleeding into the paper like tears. I shouldn't have drawn it. I know. I shouldn't have. The wind dies. Silence. Not the quiet of absence, but the thick, suffocating stillness of something, waiting. The air hums low and wet, like the sound of molasses pouring from a broken jar. It seeps into the room, slow and unrelenting, filling the cracks in the floorboards, the gaps between the walls. The kitten's ears twitch, its body tenses. The aura behind my eyes flares, not violet this time, but black, a void pressing against my skull. I don't turn around. I can't. The lenses feel cold against my temples, a familiar discomfort that used to be a gateway now. It's just another layer of wrongness. The auras, they're there flickering and shifting, a nauseating kaleidoscope superimposed on the world. Dr. Albright's is a pathetic, stuttering candle flame, barely clinging to existence. Mrs. Henderson, the landlord, a gaping void, swallowing all light. They should be comforting, these colors, a roadmap of emotional states. Instead, they're mocking. The storm cloud palette bleeds into my vision, everything tinged with a sickly gray blue. The observatory walls seem to press closer, the wood grain twisting into grotesque faces. The kitten is gone from the floor, a phantom weight still lingering where it had been. I should check the map. I need to, but the thought feels like wading through molasses, each movement a monumental effort. I force myself to stand, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. The metal of the spectacles scrapes against my collarbone, a persistent whisper that burrows into my skull. Scrape. 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 It's a new sound, wasn't there before, or maybe I just wasn't listening. I wasn't seeing the hallway is dim, the light from the single bulb at the far end casting long, distorted shadows. I focus on Albright's aura, trying to anchor myself in something tangible. It is pathetic, a desperate flicker against the encroaching darkness. I need to talk to him. He's been distant. Albright. I call out, my voice sounding hollow, swallowed by the oppressive silence. A figure emerges from the gloom, Albright. Or something resembling him. The aura is still there, that pathetic, sputtering flame. But something's wrong. The face is familiar, the posture, the way he shifts his weight from foot to foot. But the eyes, they're too wide, too vacant. I raise the spectacles higher, squinting. The aura shifts, distorts, and then it's Simene, my own aura, a storm cloud of despair and fractured memory superimposed over his face. The elongated features, the oversized eyes, they're reflected back at me, a grotesque caricature. What? He doesn't speak. He just stares, that vacant, unsettling gaze fixed on me. The scraping sound intensifies, a metallic rasp that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. So scrape, scrape, scrape. It's closer now, surrounding me, a cage of sound. I whirl around, searching for the source. The ceiling. The kitten is there, perched on the edge of the beam, its pale gray eyes fixed on me. It doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, just watches, a silent, accusing judge. My hand flies to my neck, instinctively checking for the icy fingers, the phantom teeth. Nothing. But the memory of it is visceral, a cold dread that settles in my stomach. The feeling of something twin-watching, something twin-waiting. This isn't possible, I mutter, my voice trembling. I drop the spectacles. The auras vanish, leaving me blind in a world of shadows. The scraping sound continues, relentless, mocking. I stumble back, knocking against a bookshelf. The scent of old paper and dust fills my nostrils, a suffocating reminder of this place of my captivity. I need to get out. I have to, but as I reach for the door, a new sound cuts through the scraping, a click, a delicate, final click. The silence that follows is absolute, a suffocating blanket that smothers all other sound. Then, a new sound, a soft, definitive snap. The sound of a locket snapping shut. The spectacles are still there, lying on the desk like a coiled serpent waiting to strike. My fingers tremble as I reach for them, the weight of the lenses cold and heavy in my palm. I can feel the storm cloud aura flickering at the edges of my vision, a sickly gray-blue haze that pulses like a dying star. The air in the observatory is thick with the scent of brine and something else, something rotten, something familiar. The wind howls through the cracks in the wood, carrying the stench of decay, and I know it's not just the storm outside. I hurl the spectacles against the wall. The impact is a dull thud, followed by the sharp footy of shattering glass. The auras vanish, and for a second, I'm blind in the dim light. But the storm cloud aura isn't gone. It's slid inside me now, swirling in my skull like a tempest. I press my palms against my temples, but it doesn't help. The distortion is permanent. The world tilts, and for a heartbeat, I see myself in the reflection of the broken lenses, a grotesque parody. My face stretched too wide, my eyes too large, my limbs elongated like a marionette's. I was Sivan replaced her. Not just in the observatory, not just by that thing wearing Albright's face. Before I ever left, my breath comes in ragged gasps. The fury is a living thing inside me, a molten core of rage that burns through the regret. I slam my fists onto the desk, the wood groaning beneath the impact. The photo of my past life is there, a yellowed snapshot of a younger me standing in front of a different observatory, one with brass fixtures and clean glass. My hands shake as I pick it up. The edges are frayed, the image blurred where my fingers have rubbed it raw. I was someone else then, someone who believed in maps, in boundaries, in the illusion of control. The kitten is on the desk now, its tiny paws pressing into the photo like it's trying to anchor me to something solid. It doesn't move, doesn't blink, just watches me with those pale, accusing eyes. The wind carries the scent of decay, but now there's something else, regret, thick and cloying like molasses pouring into my lungs. I can taste it. It's sweet and suffocating. I snatch the photo and crumple it in my fist. The paper tears with a dry, brittle sound. The kitten doesn't flinch, it just sits there silent and unyielding, as if it's waiting for me to break. The molasses sound fills the room, slow and heavy, like a dam bursting. It's not the wind anymore. It's the sound of time itself, thick and viscous, dragging me down into the past. I can see it in my mind's eye, the way Albright's face shifted, the way the kitten's eyes never left me, the way the scraping sound had followed me everywhere. I was never escaping. I was just running in circles, a rat in a maze, and the maze was inside my own head. I drop to my knees, the floorboards cold beneath me. The molasses sound slows, then stops. The silence is absolute, a suffocating weight. The kitten's eyes glow now, the storm cloud aura flickering in their depths like a dying ember. It reaches out with one tiny paw and touches my wrist. The sensation is electric, a jolt of pain that shoots up my arm. I gasp, but the kitten doesn't move. It just stares at me. And in that moment I know, it's not the kitten, that's the witness. It's the Hwyn librarian, the spectral librarian, the one who's been watching me from the shadows, who's been replacing me piece by piece. The kitten's eyes widen, and for a second, I see my own face reflected in them. A distorted, elongated version of myself, my lips stretched too wide in a silent scream. The wind howls outside, carrying the scent of brine and decay, but now there's something new, something final. The locket is in my pocket, cold and heavy against my skin. I don't remember putting it there, but I know what it means. The kitten's eyes glow brighter, and the storm cloud aura swirls around us, a vortex of gray-blue despair. I reach into my pocket and pull out the locket. The metal is smooth and cold, the portrait inside a grotesque caricature of me, my limbs too long, my eyes too wide. I snap it shut, the kitten's eyes burn like embers, and the world tilts again. The last thing I see is my own face, distorted and screaming, before the storm cloud aura consumes me whole. The walls of my apartment are weeping, not with water, never water, with that same storm gray slime, thick as uncooked dough, oozing down the plaster in slow, deliberate rivulets. It pools at the baseboards, spreading like ink in a glass of rainwater. The air smells of it too, sweet and cloying, like the inside of a rotting apple left too long in the sun. I press my palm against the wall, and the slime clings to my skin, cold and tacky, the texture of a dead man's lips. My breath fogs the glass of the window, but when I wipe it away, the reflection isn't mine. The scraping starts before I hear it. It's the sound of 1,000 nails dragged across concrete, a chorus of agony tuned just below my skull. But before it becomes noise, it's a pressure, a weight settling into my bones, the way the air thickens before a storm. Fingers twitch. The locket in my pocket burns like a brand. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember thither to anything after the observatory. The echoes layer over the scraping now, my voice distorted, whispering from the corners of the room, "You are never leaving." The words slither into my ears, damp and heavy, like worms crawling out of my own mouth. I clap my hands over them, but the sound seeps through my fingers, vibrates in my teeth. The molasses drips from the ceiling in slow, deliberate pulses, each drop landing with a wet plute plop that resonates through the floorboards. A pattern. Always a pattern. I turn, the kitten is on the bed, its tiny body coiled like a spring. Its fur is the wrong shade of white, too bright, like moonlight on milk. It doesn't move, doesn't blink, just watches me with eyes that aren't quite eyes anymore, too large, too dark. Pupils swallowing the iris whole. The air hums around it, a low, electric thrum, like the charge before a storm. The molasses thickens. It doesn't fall anymore. It 20 flows Erken, a slow, viscous river creeping across the floor, pooling around the kitten's paws. The pattern emerges in the slime, a spiral, intricate as a fingerprint, the same shape the icy fingers traced on my skin before. My breath hitches, the scraping stops, the room tilts. The kitten's tail flicks once, twice too fast to run wrong, and the molasses screeches as it completes the design, a perfect jagged circle around the bedpost. Then the sound changes. It's not scraping anymore. It's a scraping, but deeper, sharper. 1,000 knives dragged across steel, the noise of something being trin-carved. The molasses whizzes as it reacts to the sound, bubbling like oil on a hot griddle. The kitten's ears twitch. Its mouth parts just slightly, and I see the teeth, too many, too sharp, arranged in a grin that doesn't belong to any animal. The locket in my pocket screams, not in sound. In my bones, the metal digs into my palm as I reach for it, the clasp snapping open without resistance. Inside, the portrait isn't mine anymore. The face in the locket is Endefusivend. The librarian's but wrong, stretched too thin, her eyes wide and black and empty. The scraping becomes a roar, a storm of sound that rattles my ribs. The molasses sweet boil seas rising in tendrils that coil around my ankles like serpents. The kitten's voice is the last thing I hear before the world ends. It's not a meow. It's a laugh, high and brittle, the sound of glass shattering. "You were always mine, Doctor." The words dissolve into the scraping, into the molasses, into the storm gray walls. The pattern glows now, a halo of sickly light around the bedpost, and the locket's portrait breathes. The last thing I see is my own face in the slime, stretched and screaming, before the scraping becomes a blade, and the molasses becomes blood. The pattern in the molasses isn't just a design, it's a signature. My gaze locks onto the spiral etched into the thick storm gray ooze pooling around the bedpost. The same spiral the icy fingers traced on my skin before the observatory. It's not random. It's a fugamapi. The molasses pulses against my bare foot, cold and heavy as a wet stone, each ripple sending a fresh wave of that familiar soul-chilling pressure through my bones. For this was never an escape, for the thought slithers through my mind, sharp as the scraping sound that used to haunt me. This was the cage, the librarian's design. The locket in my pocket burns, a brand against my thigh, its metal cold and sharp. I don't need to open it. I already know the face inside. The librarian's but stretched, hollow-eyed, the same wrong proportions as the kitten now watching me. It's no longer a kitten. It's a fuvin. Its fur, once unnaturally bright white, recedes to reveal the same storm gray beneath, like the slime itself. Its limbs are too long, too thin, stretching the delicate frame. The eyes, oh God, the eyes are enormous. swallowing the irises whole. The pupils dilated into black voids. It mirrors the locket portrait perfectly. It 22 is the portrait. It raises a clawed hand, the movement unnaturally fluid, and the air hums with that low electric thrum, like a transformer failing. The scent of brine and decay, thick as the molasses, floods my nostrils, the wind carrying it through the broken window, a mocking echo of the Dust Bowl's stench. It steps closer. The molasses beneath its feet hisses as it flows around its elongated toes, bubbling with a sickly light. Its head tilts, the movement too deliberate, too human. Then it leans in. Its breath hits my face wet. Rhythmic gasps that smell of brine and old fish. Each inhale a heavy, wet twin schwoshka that vibrates against my cheek. Each exhale a soft, guttural funhuff that fills the hollows of my skull. The breathing is the only sound now, replacing the scraping, the whispers, the molasses dripping. It's the sound of something 20 alivid and wrong right against my skin. I can feel the warmth of it, the dampness, the unnatural rhythm that isn't breath. But a demand, my own breath catches, shallow and useless. The locket's portrait swim-breathed seed inside my pocket, a phantom echo of the thing before me. Fui were always mine, Dr. Fui. Fui, the librarian's voice. Now the kitten's voice, a dry rasp against the wet gasps, the breathing intensifies. Each wet fushishki is closer, heavier. The thing's face fills my vision too large. Too still, the black eyes reflecting nothing but the storm-gray glow of the molasses pattern. My fingers claw at the pocket, the metal edge digging into my palm. I feel the locket's clasp, the familiar cold weight. I need to open it, to see, to know what's in the mirror. The breathing stops abruptly, not a pause. Silences, a vacuum sucking the air from the room, leaving only the thudding of my own heart, too loud in the sudden void. The silence is heavier than the molasses, colder than the wind. Then, click. The sound is clean, final, metallic, sharp as a snapped bone. It comes from the locket, not opening. Closing, the sound of the locket snapping shut, sealing the portrait inside, sealing Prüfen inside. The last thing I hear before the silence swallows everything is the echo of that dry, satisfied fid-click. The sound of a prison door locking from the inside. The storm-gray walls hold their breath. The molasses glows, and the silence stretches, thick and final, as the pattern on the floor pulses once, slowly, like a heartbeat.